What's up, y'all? Tight Shirt Terry Warfield back in the building. Hey, I hope you're having a great day so far. Let's cut right into the meat potatoes. A lot of y'all and all of my recent A7 IV videos, which if you missed that playlist, it is right up there. It's a bunch of videos packed into that playlist and growing. But a lot of y'all in my videos and also in Facebook groups and stuff like that have been asking, is the video out of the Sony A7 IV, specifically 1080p, better than the 1080p out of the venerable Sony A7 III? Now, some of you might argue like nobody cares about 1080p, but there's a lot of people who still prefer to use 1080p for file sizes and stuff like that, easier to edit, all that good stuff. There's a lot of people that still do it, especially for the slow-mo and Sony's cameras, unless you bump up to like the A7S III, which has 4K 120 and all that stuff. A lot of us use 1080p 60 and 1080p 120, so I think it is worth the conversation. This test that I'm about to run in here, I'm sorry, I got to get the housekeeping stuff out the way. I did not film in SI, so the all intra format. So I have to, kind of discount that because my cards are not fast enough and I wasn't about to buy new cards for this video. The only thing Sony really changed was in 4K 24, 4K 30, 4K 60, the ability to shoot in 422 10-bit. All of the bit rates, the codec stack is pretty much exactly the freaking same with some differences that we'll talk about later in this video. So with that said, I have some clips lined up here for you. I want to jump right into Final Cut Pro and show you these clips. Let's do it. All right, so the first clip is just me sitting at the table, and I don't use S and Q, which I'll talk about that in a second, but let's go ahead and take a look at this real quick. All right, now, as you can probably spot the differences in the default picture profiles, I want you to now take a look at the sharpness. Look at this. Now, I'm gonna pause it. Now take a look. Are you able to spot how much more detail the Sony A7 IV has in 1080p? It is quite a bit of a difference when it comes to detail. Now, the question is, are you really punching into, the snobbish, creepish, pixel peeping levels? I don't think so, but the A7 IV is absolutely sharper in 24 frames per second. And a lot of you might have argued, oh, you should have did this outside. I did do a bunch of tests outside, which you'll see those also. So the next test I wanted to do, same thing side by side, but 30 frames a second. Could there possibly be a difference in 30 frames per second? All parameters are exactly the same except for shutter speed, which I obviously had to change, and also the fact that this is 30 frames per second. So let's go ahead and press play. And now that it's gonna go ahead and punch in, you're probably gonna notice the same thing. Let me pause it. Look around my eyes and stuff like that. That boy needs some sleep. But as you see, there is more detail, all the wrinkles and pores and stuff you can see in 1080p on the A7 IV, where on the A7 III, it's not as much detail there. Now, again, at normal sizes, are you gonna really notice a difference? I wouldn't, but you might be one of those pixel peeping times. Let's go on to the next test. Now, the next test, I started to think is the 10-bit out of the A7 IV better than the 8-bit out of the A7 IV? So that's what I did here. I set both of these up. This is the A7 IV, same lens, same setup, 24 frames a second. However, on the left side, we have 8-bit. On the right side, we have 422 10-bit. So I'm gonna play this. Now I'm gonna let it punch in right here, and then I'm gonna stop it, right? Boom. Okay, so here's the difference between 420 8-bit and 422 10-bit out of the Sony A7 IV. If there is any difference in detail or sharpness, I cannot see it. And if I do see it, I feel like it might be placebo. You can let me know down below if you can spot a difference. I don't think there's any type of difference when it comes to sharpness because the bit rate is the same. However, you got to remember when it comes to 10-bit, which I'm going to show you a little bit later in this video, the power of 10-bit 422 is really when you need to do green screening, or when you need to push colors really, really far, manipulate the colors. That's where 10-bit really kicks in. But if you aren't color grading or anything like that, you're not going to pretty much notice any difference unless you in some extreme circumstances. Let's move forward to the next example, which is outside. All right, so with this test is back to A7 III, back to A7 IV. Outside, 60 frames per second. Now, this one was a little bit more challenging because obviously it was cold as hell outside. It was extra windy. And outside the sun changes, the shade changes and stuff like that. So I tried to make them, composition wise as close as possible. But Same thing, A7 IV versus A7 III, 24 to 70 millimeter gangster mode set at f4, and I did have both cameras set to aperture priority so that I could at least control the aperture. So let's go ahead and press play on this. Same thing, you'll notice a difference in the color. These are picture profile off. And when I punch in, I want to stop right here. Look at the A7 IV when it comes to the shallow but great. Look at that text on the A7 IV versus the A7 III. Now, both of them are not extra sharp, but you'll notice that the text on the A7 IV is sharper, and I made sure to focus in the same exact place. So again, A7 IV wins that sharpness test, but not by a whole lot. All right, the next test is an example of 8-bit versus 10-bit. Now, these are both A7 IV files, 60 frames a second. One is in 8-bit, one is in 10-bit. Now, these clips, I color graded them to all hell. It is an ugly color grade, but I really pushed the colors around to demonstrate what 8-bit versus 10-bit really does for you. All right, let me put my glasses on to make sure I ain't lying to y'all and showing you the wrong clip. So right now, you are looking at the Sony A7 IV upper right-hand corner of the image in the sky where all of the clouds are and stuff like that. And notice how it's actually pretty clean, even though I color graded this like it's a mess. It's an ugly color grade, right? But I want to turn it off because you don't really understand the difference until you see this. Look at this. You see that? Now look in the upper right hand corner on the 8-bit image. Look how much this fell apart. Look at all of these artifacts. Look at this banding up here. So I'm going to turn it on and off so you can see the difference. So this is really where the power of 10-bit comes into play. You can push and pull the colors from the file way more than you could with 8-bit. Now, is it a big deal? I mean, if you get your colors and all that stuff right, not really, but when you need the color grade, and especially when you start working with those, you know, high dynamic range scenarios that you need to fix them, yo, that 10-bit goes a long way versus 8-bit. Let's finish it up with the 120 frames per second test. Now, this is A7 III versus A7 IV. You can only get 10-bit 120 frames per second with the A7 IV if you shoot in slow and quick. And again, I don't shoot in slow and quick, and I didn't have a card to do all intro recording or XAVCSI. Sony got to do better with all these freaking acronyms. But anyways, let's go ahead and play this. As you see on the screen, same setup, 420 8-bit versus 420 8-bit, 1080p, 120 frames per second. Press play. All right, so this is normal speed. It's going to slow down to 20%. So this is 20% right here. And it's really difficult to tell any difference at this regular viewing size. Now, once we punch in, it's the same thing. Let me pause right here. If you look at the A7 III where it says shadow but great versus the A7 IV where it says shadow but great, there is more detail in the A7 IV. So I hope that test was conclusive enough to show you that the A7 IV is absolutely better when it comes to 1080p. Now, is it enough to upgrade if you are a primary 1080p shooter? I don't know if it's enough for you to upgrade. I would say all of the other upgrades that the camera have make it worth the upgrade over the A7 III. But if you just looking to see, is the A7 IV better when it comes to 1080p than the A7 III, I would give it maybe, in my testing, maybe a 15 to 20% advantage, if that. Anyways, I hope this video was helpful. Hope you liked it and all that good stuff. Don't forget to like, subscribe. So let me know what y'all thought down there below. It's late. I'm about to get out of here. Piece of chicken grease. I'm out. Much love. Peace.